Good morning and welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Morning Show. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us this morning. If you're watching us live, we appreciate that. If you are checking us out online, we do appreciate that. We do upload these shows to www.livingstonparishnews.com/podcast. We have audio and video versions available there, however you want to look at it. And of course, Facebook keeps this show on our Facebook page in perpetuity, so they keep that video available for you to watch whenever is convenient for you. Traffic this morning, you're looking at your normal delays as essential folks go to work. Minor delays at 4-H Club Road, River Road, and 190. Minor delays at 190 and Range Avenue, as well as minor delays at 190 and Jubin Road. Seem to be messing that up a lot lately. Your weather today, it's 60 degrees. That thunder bumper kind of brought through some nice weather. 74 your high, or nice if you like this kind of late spring little cool front. 74 is your high. 51 your overnight low. Of course, as we mentioned, had some rough weather come through yesterday. Not so bad for parts of Livingston Parish, worse for others, of course. Some down power lines in the Springfield area caused some road closures. Of course, with the stay-at-home order, not a whole lot of people on the roads as is, but of course it is unfortunate. They lost power. Some folks in the Watson area lost power as well. If you still don't have, if you've still lost power or you know areas that lost power, please let us know. According to Entergy and Dimco maps this morning, everybody's back up and running. Wanted to see how accurate their maps were. So if you're still out of power this morning here in Livingston Parish, please let us know down there in the comments. Of course, the heavy weather yesterday, a reminder of what we started discussing last year and will continue to discuss, and that is local drainage and your impact as an individual on it. Please remember, keep your ditches clear, keep your yard clear of trash. Yard clippings and that kind of thing are supposed to go in the dumpster. Blocked culverts, blocked ditches, cause flooding of other people's homes, cause backups, cause our entire drainage system to kind of mess up, flood roads and that kind of thing. So please remember, pick up your trash, keep your ditch clean, that kind of thing. We're in that time of year. We're getting these heavy rains coming through. Don't forget last year, 2019, where we had just rain after rain after rain, 6 inches in 2 hours, that kind of thing. And of course, when you spread that over a large area and your ditches aren't clean, your culverts aren't clean, your pipes underground aren't clean, a lot of bad things can happen, a lot of backup, and not even necessarily terrible things, just flooding of roads, a lot of inconvenience. So let's try to keep our ditches and culverts and all those things clean on our property, hoping that our neighbor will do the same. Of course, it is good for the entire drainage system. We're all trying to get that water either into Grays Creek, into the Amite River, into the Tickfaw River, into the into any of these creeks in and Beaver Creek, for instance, Hornsby Creek. Anywhere you are in Livingston Parish, you've got a big creek or canal or river near you, and you're trying to get that water out. So keep your local area as clean as possible. Jumping into the coronavirus, we have 20,595 cases in Louisiana as of yesterday's Easter update, Sunday. 840 deaths, 2,084 hospitalized, and 458 on vents. Want to remind folks that the modeling is based mostly on the number of hospitalized, the number on vents, as well as the number of deaths. That's how they're kind of determining these curves and whether or not they're flattening. Once we've kind of gotten the curve flattened completely and maybe even on the downturn with regard to hospitalizations, people being put on ventilators and deaths, then we're going to look more towards higher scale testing, and maybe the number of cases will factor more into that. But right now, because of the delay between when the test was taken and when the results and that sort of thing, they're more focused on the things that are real time, and that is for those statistics that we gave you. Again, 2,084 in hospitals, 458 on vents, with 840 deaths. Now, over the weekend, the United States did surpass Italy for the most COVID-19 related deaths in the world. To be expected, I suppose, a little bit. There are a lot of people talking about, well, the comparison between Italy's population and America's population, which is a fine point. Italy has about just over 60 million people. The United States has about 360 million people, so about 6 to 1. So it's to be expected, I suppose, with similar outbreaks in certain areas, including Louisiana, Los Angeles, New York, that kind of thing, that we were going to experience a higher death toll due to those populations. So important to have some comparative statistics there. But again, the United States, based on reporting, has become one of the deadlier countries for COVID-19 in the world. Also important to remind folks that the Livingston Parish has 120 cases and 1 death on 326 total tests. Want to let folks know about what a recovery looks like. Dr. Alex Bu of the Louisiana Department of Health, let me try that again. Dr. Alex Bu of the Louisiana Department of Health, who joins the governor at most of his press conferences. Actually, I think after about the first week, he's there every time to answer testing-related questions. Talked about what a recovery looks like. And according to CDC guidelines, there's 2 types. There is the test-based one, which we've discussed here before, which the state is not utilizing. It requires 2 extra coronavirus tests. We just don't have them. There's not enough tests in stock to do that, unfortunately. It also requires, when you want to report recoveries, you've got to do that extra testing by official CDC standards to call those people officially recovered. However, there is sort of the non-test based watching the symptoms kind of deal. Those people are considered recovered and they leave the hospital, but this is much like one of the reasons doctors can't just come out and say hydroxychloroquine is the miracle drug for COVID-19. One, they don't really know that that's true. It does help some, doesn't help others. They're kind of working through why that is the case and that sort of thing. But they are licensed, they have rules, and they can't come out and say things that haven't been tested. A lot of that is for other people to say. So, one of the things that doctors are doing is they're going through this non-test based structure, which we'll discuss the steps in just a second, and letting people out of the hospital. But, and there are plenty of people who have, by the non-test based structure, recovered. Ward 2 Marshal Joe Max Shoemate here in Denham Springs is one of them. So it's important to remember that there are plenty of people who have recovered. There is a reason that the number of quote unquote recovered people has not been listed, and that's why doctors have to follow certain rules, certain regulations. Last thing they want is to do a non-test based, okay, these guys have recovered and we have shipped them back out to the world, and then they start spreading COVID because they were not double tested. A lot of these folks who technically recover by the non-test based are sent home to self-quarantine for 14 days just in case. So they're still not 100% sure. They just know that they don't necessarily have to be in the hospital anymore. So let's go through those steps real quick. 7 days have to have passed just as a baseline since symptoms started to appear. That includes fever, loss of taste, and upper respiratory issues. If they do get admitted to the hospital, there has to be, while they're in the hospital, what is described as a significant improvement of symptoms. Now, what that means, not entirely sure. Dr. Bu did not go into real detail about that. Just that they have to show that they no longer need hospital care. I suppose in a lot of cases that means the symptoms of pneumonia start to go away and that sort of thing. And of course, one of the things that they do discuss specifically in detail is fever. You have to go 72 hours without fever, without having to use fever-reducing drugs. So if you'll remember, when we talked about Marshal Joe Max Shoemate going into the hospital, he was there for about 3 days. He entered the first day that gave him hydroxychloroquine. It seemed to work, and he got better and better and better until they let him out. If you continue to have fever or need a ventilator, you're going to have to stay in the hospital, and you're not going to be considered recovered. So there's 2 different types there, of course. There's the test-based recovery, and then there is the, sort of eye test of the symptoms, and they let you go, and you're technically out of the hospital, but you got to go home and self-quarantine for 14 days. So are people recovering from COVID-19? Yes. Is there a reason that they are not reporting those numbers just yet? Also, yes. They're trying to figure out the language and the best way to describe it. Do they want to describe it as test-based recoveries and those who have just been able to leave the hospital? Well, what about those folks that were able to treat it at home? Are they technically recovered? There's a lot of issue that goes through that. The best thing to do is just you as a person understanding and seeing some of these reports from media, from your friends on Facebook that, so-and-so has gone through it, is now over it, and has quarantined for 14 days, and they are now recovered. Yes, people are recovering from COVID-19. That is happening. But from a doctor standpoint, a licensed doctor standpoint, you can't, they're not able to make statements like that, at least not yet. Now, if they decide, if the Louisiana Department of Health decides to add to their dashboard to say, test-based recoveries, which they're not going to be many because they're not offering those extra tests at this point because we don't have the supply for it. Or if they start saying, here's non-test-based recoveries, they might do that. Dr. BU said in an interview, at one of the press conferences last week, that they're considering that kind of language and releasing that on the dashboard. So we will be keeping an eye on that. But yes, there are obviously not everybody is dying. Then we would have, all these people in the hospital. We'd have thousands of deaths at this point. But there is a reason that they're just not they're not releasing recovery statistics at this time, because they wouldn't. Right now, they're trying to the best way to put it is the way that Alex BU put it, Dr. Alex BU, excuse me, and that is that they are releasing the information they know is good, that they know is accurate. So that's what they're trying to do, and if they can find an accurate way to depict that information, I'm sure that they will. It's important to remember during this time, of course, the message coming up to Easter Sunday and Easter weekend in general was, please celebrate with your core family, get online to celebrate with the rest of your family, do a Zoom call or something like that, but keep your distance. Of course, we'll find out in a few weeks if that was indeed the case. As COVID-19 has about a 14-day incubation period, so we'll find out about 1st of May whether or not people followed that. Garbage truck distracted me. Big old truck rushing by. We'll find out in about 14 days whether or not folks really followed those rules. Based on my social media, it seemed like a lot of people were following the rules, doing the Zoom call with family, that kind of thing. So thank you for that. I know a lot of people appreciate it because, of course, in 14 days, it's going to be roughly that April 30th, May 1st date. Now, it's important to bring that right back up because that's not going to be a light switch transition. The governor continues to say it. Even the president and his task force continue to say it. That April 30th, May 1st date is going to be like, okay, we're going to test these waters. We're going to, social distancing and mitigation efforts, which we'll talk about in a second, are going to stay in place, but we're going to try to get people back to work. We're going to try to figure out a way to do this until we have a vaccine and a therapeutic treatment, and by that time, they might say, okay, we're just going to give everybody hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil. I don't know that specifically. I do know that they continue to preach that this April 30th, May 1st date is not going to be some sort of light switch. They're not just going to turn it off or turn the economy back on, I guess you can say, because one, the economy just isn't going to reboot that quickly, and two, there's still a whole lot of questions about COVID-19, how it spread, how it can affect people, why it affects some people more than others. And of course, we'll be discussing that later in the week. But the big thing that's going to come after that April 30th date is more testing, more wide-scale testing as more COVID-19 tests are created. Going to try to test more people, going to try to find out more about people's backgrounds and how they got it and that sort of thing. They're going to see if more people are genetically more prone to have worse symptoms than others. So they're going to be looking into that going forward. And of course, we'll talk in more detail about that because the governor did form a task force. We're going to talk more about that probably tomorrow and Wednesday. But please remember, just because we're past Easter weekend doesn't mean that those mitigation efforts aren't still in place. And please remember, those are wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Don't touch your face. Disinfect common surfaces. This is a new one. CDC recommending that you wear some kind of mask in public. Just because we got past Easter weekend and that kind of thing doesn't mean that you still shouldn't think about that. Do that if you can. If you do have a mask, 10 or less to any kind of gathering, preferably less. Stay home if you can to do your work, and definitely stay home if sick, and utilize telehealth to get in touch with your doctor. Still waiting for a school announcement. Of course, this is very confusing time. This is going to be another one of those fluid situations as the governor discusses with the Louisiana Department of Education exactly how to handle, doing these end of year grading. The governor has waived all the responsibility testing, but you still got to have grades. Still, how are kids going to advance and grade? How are we going to do graduation? Still a lot of questions to be answered. So I'm sure the governor is having discussions. I mean, I say I'm sure. I'm not. I have no idea. We know that this is what we do know. Last week, the Louisiana Department of Education, as well as the State Superintendents Association, sent to the governor a recommendation that he go ahead and just cancel the rest of school until the end for the rest of this year. Now, the governor said that he is probably going to comply with that request. What I was just discussing was there are going to be a lot of logistical and application questions that are going to have to come up over the next few days as they work through that process. And of course, this all came up before Easter weekend, so we can expect to hear more about that coming up this week at his weekly press conferences. Of course, he'll have one today at 2:30 to kind of give us a weekend update as we pull those things forward. Senator John Kennedy announced going into the weekend that as part of the CARES Act, Louisiana was going to get a share of some of that PPE purchasing, or personal protective equipment purchasing. $475 million worth of PPE was going to be coming to Louisiana to help some of these men and women on the front lines who are fighting COVID-19 in the hospitals and doing just the best that they can with the material that has been provided to them so far. So please keep them in your thoughts. And of course, $475 million is nothing to scoff at. It's quite a bit of PPE coming to Louisiana via the CARES Act and the lobbying, I guess you can say, of Senator John Kennedy. Dr. Fauci actually did say on Friday this past week that summer vacations are still in the cards for a lot of people if we continue to continue this strict social distancing, try to flatten this curve in most of these larger places because these folks could still be contagious, could still get back out. Of course, there are some reports of those who tested positive for COVID-19 in some of these other countries who were cleared to leave and who tested negative are now testing positive again. They're still trying to gather more data on that. We don't know if that is, if that's due to faulty testing, if they are indeed getting sick again. We're still trying to figure all this out. But those were early reports coming out of Asia, mostly China, Korea, as well as Japan. So we'll see what those reports continue to say. But right now, Dr. Fauci seems, to be very upbeat and positive about the way the numbers are panning out. They seem to be at least flattening in some places, like Louisiana and like Los Angeles. Not entirely sure how things are going in Washington and New York at the moment, but we can hope that over the next couple of weeks they continue to flatten their curve, and that folks, we can flatten out this death curve, and try to get back to some semblance of getting to work, getting back to normal as we, of course, remember these mitigation and social distancing efforts until we get some sort of therapeutic treatment as well as a vaccine. The sheriff went around dressed up as the Easter Bunny, or a deputy maybe. We're not sure if it was Jason Arnott under there or not. But to try to spread a little bit of holiday cheer, he went from neighborhood to neighborhood, trying to just, wave at folks, tell them it's going to be okay, try to have a little bit of regular Easter and an Easter celebration as he, as we move through what was a very different Easter for us here in Louisiana, as we like to gather, of course, like to eat crawfish or whatever you have during Easter. The sheriff tried to get around to different neighborhoods, give folks a little bit of hope. Speaking of hope, Miss Mindy Robinson of Watson spent 4 hours on roughly a 10-foot chalk mural on her driveway. This would have been on Good Friday. She depicted Isaiah 53:5, which is, by his wounds we are healed. Let me say that again. Isaiah 53:5, by his wounds we are healed. And of course, it was very much an Easter mural as we go into the celebration of Christ's resurrection, which is what Easter weekend is all about. So thank you, Miss Robinson. You can find a picture of that either on our Facebook page or on our Instagram page, Livingston Parish News. So you can go check that out. Last but certainly not least on the list, we're going to jump back into the cases, but last but certainly not least on the list is, of course, on Friday, Mr. Lane Hardy had his first stop of the virtual tour on the Raising Cane's Facebook page. You can go to lanehardymusic.com to check out the full list of virtual stops for his new tour as he released, his new album, Where I Grew Up. So please check that out at lanehardymusic.com. One last time, before I get back into the cases, please remember your drainage. Please remember to keep your ditches and your culverts clear as we start getting into the spring rainy season, of course, into the summer. If you remember last year had a lot of, not a lot of spread out rain, just real intense localized storms. So please remember that water being dropped in that amount of time. We've got to have clear ditches and culverts to get it out. One last time, 20,595 COVID-19 cases in Louisiana, 840 deaths. With the U.S., of course, 6 times as much population as Italy, but has surpassed Italy as one of the deadliest places in the world at about close to 19,000 total deaths. 840 in Louisiana, 2,084 hospitalized on 458 ventilators. In Livingston Parish, there are 120 cases, 1 death on 326 deaths. One last time, my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us for this Monday morning Livingston Parish News Morning Show. Please remember we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays. Please remember our print edition is a magazine style. It comes direct to your mailbox. It is clean with the mail system practicing good habits. We're going to be talking about the post office later on in the week. Of course, they're having financial trouble, but it is $7 a month. You get a paper every Thursday, and some months you get a bonus 5th paper on the 5th Thursday of the month. So please remember $7 a month for the paper in your mailbox. We are online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. We do have a special webpage set up for coronavirus information that is free, www.livingstonparishnews.com/coronavirus. It is also for the rest of the website, unless there is some breaking news, which we push out free. For the rest of the website, it is $5 a month. We do appreciate you joining us this morning. We do hope you have a great day. It's turning out so far to be a pretty beautiful day, and we will be back with you tomorrow morning.